Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we have been talking in the recent months about Argentina, and of course John went over in our last report about a month or so ago about Argentina, the fact that Argentina has been through about a dozen or more hyperinflationary scenarios over the last century, and it just, problem, reaction, solution, repeat, and Argentina, its peso just actually, I think about a couple days ago, hit its lowest point in history, and which is interesting because that's versus the US dollar, which is also devaluing at a rapid rate. So, I think there's a lot to be said about that. When we compare it to the US dollar, it's easy to say, well, yeah, it's just crashing, but it's crashing more than it even looks like because the US dollar is steadily devaluing and has been since its inception in 1913. So this isn't good news for anyone. The US, Argentina, or any country in the world that has a centrally planned system based in fiat currency, which we'll go into in a moment. But as this article from Zero Hedge says, peso plummets stalls for now as Argentina throws $450 million at market. As the first update here at Zero Hedge says, BCRA's first $150 million auction was like a fart in a hurricane as a peso collapsed to 29.5 to the US dollar. But then Bloomberg reports the central bank unleashed another $300 million auction, and for now the peso is quote-unquote stabilizing. The Argentine peso collapsed again today, plummeting below last week's record low to 29 to the US dollar. Desk chatter suggests that no one turned up this morning as the central bank announced it would increase its daily spot auctions to USD 150 million on Thursday and Friday. And you can see this chart here, it says a lot. Despite continued efforts by the BCRA to sell USD on behalf of the Treasury, this intervention is unlikely to revert the trend, as Citi notes that the central bank has been left with a weak balance sheet to fight off a speculative attack. Argentine bank stocks are also plummeting. Critically, as Daniel Lacalle recently wrote, the recent collapse of the Argentine peso and other emerging currencies is more than a warning sign. It could be the arrival of a sudden stop. As I explained, it says, in Escape from Central Bank Trap, BEP 2017, a sudden stop happens when the extraordinary and excessive flow of cheap US dollars into emerging markets suddenly reverses and funds return to the US looking for safer assets. The central bank carry trade of low interest rates and abundant liquidity was used to buy growth and inflation-linked assets in emerging markets. So, John, it doesn't get over my head the fact that the fiat system always fails, always will, always has, going back to 1024 AD in China, but some of this gets a little bit over my head. So can you explain what on earth is going on in Argentina?
Well, what's going on? It's a currency failure again, guys. It's history is repeating itself, quite substantially and very rapidly in Argentina. And it seems like they never learn from their own mistakes. They keep on, misusing the currency. And of course, this is not the lowest the peso has been. If you look at the historical scale of pesos, because you got to remember, every single time it fails, they still call it the peso, the Argentinian peso, but it's a different version. Yeah. This is
a new revamped version of another failed currency.
Yeah, so this is just the worst the new peso has been, ever since 2001, I believe, when it failed. So you're looking at, and what you got to look at also is just over the last month, me and Josh were just running the numbers here, and it actually has dropped about 28.57% just over the last month, and that's substantial. Think about if you we're doing trade outside with US dollars or whatever, that means that your currency lost 30% of its value, purchasing power, and is ridiculous. And if you also look at countries like Venezuela, one of their biggest downfalls was that half of their debt was in US dollar denominated bonds, so they had to actually pay back in US dollars. But the problem is their currency was garbage, worthless, so there was nobody that could pay back with bolivars. So people would be stupid to take it. So that's what you're seeing. Of course, Argentina is heading towards yet again. It's just insane to watch this, like how nobody's learning over in Argentina.
Well, I find what's interesting is that, John, we first talked about Argentina and inflation in Argentina in, I think, the beginning of 2016, when people were still saying, oh, it's fine, it's going to be fine. Argentina's, prospering. And, it's over and over again. We both predicted what would happen in Venezuela before that happened as well. And it's a no-brainer. It's a total no-brainer. It's not that we are super intelligent or anything. It's just a fact that we've seen this with every fiat currency in the history of mankind. It always goes this way, to a extreme scale or to a somewhat extreme scale. Either way, every fiat currency crashes eventually. Now, of course, as we mention all too often here at WHAM, the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the markets as well as the monetary system, so you can't put the date on a crash. So for those of you that are commenting below, when is it going to happen? We will not tell you that because we do not know, and it would be impossible for us to know. And if anyone tells you when it's going to happen, unless it's like within the week of it happening, then they're lying to you. It all comes down to the fact that people should prepare. It's not about when will it happen. It's about how can we prepare and protect our purchasing power so that we are not completely, as we already are somewhat, enslaved by the central banking system, the banking system, and the government, because they depend on our dependence. It's as simple as that. So are they going to crash in the next year? Very likely. Are they going to crash in the next 5 years? Very likely. I would say it's likely that it'll be sooner than later, considering Argentina's been over this how many times before, and I think they're pretty used to at this point just going, oh, well, a loaf of bread costs like a million times more than it did, a year or so ago. I guess we'll just, collapse this currency and create a new one with the exact same name and pretend that nothing happened at all. It is insane.
Well, it's just the life cycle of fiat currency. It always collapses like this. And that's what we're seeing all over the place. We had South Sudan. We haven't talked about that a lot lately, but that's a currency that failed just recently. Just over the 1900s, there was about, from looking at hyperinflations and devaluations, over 200 of them just throughout that century. So what you got to look at is it's just happening constantly, because when you implement a fiat currency, it has on an average, if it can really live long, about 40 years. So look at the US dollars currently. Of course, that one has. And what is interesting now is people are flying into US dollars because the emerging markets are crashing as Argentina and other markets are going down. Everybody's flooding to the US dollar, but look what happened when everybody in 2008 flooded to the US dollar. Well, right after that, it crashed and everybody got hurt severely because, of course, US dollar is looked at as the most secure place because it's the world reserve currency. Well, I think we're going to have some issues with that coming up very, very soon, because you're just seeing the kind of tremors is all these like emerging markets, currencies starting to struggle. And of course, we never know when the Exchange Stabilization Fund, to talk about that, comes in, because they have been known to go out and then buy up and manipulate. And who knows, maybe it was the ESF have been buying some pesos in order to try to prop it from, complete failure. Because when a failure in a fiat currency, people are going to look at, well, what happened to that currency? What about the US dollar?
Yeah, exactly. And, the solution isn't whether the central bank is private or public. I mean, do you really care if the guy who's got a gun to your head is Asian or white? It doesn't matter. It's a fact that they are centrally planning society into oblivion, and it's up to you as individuals to look outside of that box to a true competing currency system without legal tender laws. It is all about centralization versus decentralization, and you folks need to be decentralized.
Yeah, well, just look throughout the history, guys. If you believe that a private central bank that the population owns, if that's going to be any better, it's going to be as tempting as everybody else. And you had system like that back in the United States and other places where they had that for a little bit until, people got greedy and then wanted to print more. And then, of course, it starts failing. So it's just a bad idea when you can print money out of thin air that you shouldn't, do that. You need to have a set limit on that money. And the best one is, of course, gold and silver, which has, been the counting mechanism for years, thousands of years, as paper money has existed. Yeah. So again, me and Josh here, we believe at a free market currency where it's completely free for people to actually choose their currency, either be cryptocurrency, gold, silver, whatever you want to use.
But the market will decide, right? The free market will decide which one is the most popular to use. And you know what? If you want to use fiat, you have the right to use fiat as long as it's not through legal tender laws and you are charged the debt, which is insane because these governments are paying only off the interest on the debt, which is not what someone does when they want to pay off the debt. It is enslavement, folks. Debt enslavement.
Yeah, go try to do that with your bank. They'd be like, are you insane? Like you're not paying down the actual principal? No, it's utter insanity. This Keynesian, I would say every book that came out of, most of them that came out of Keynes is books of bad ideas.
But it's great to read and learn about so you know how bad a bad idea can be when you pair that up with the history following the works of Keynes, just like Marx, and then actually compare that with, Ludwig von Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, Ron Paul, Ron Paul on my shirt here. But I mean, it's really important that people realize that, if you want a central bank, fine, you just can't force people to use that central bank currency. You'd have to be crazy to want it. But hey, if you want a whole bunch of IOU notes and want to take upon some of that debt, go right ahead. That is your voluntary choice. But don't force the rest of us into this complex that we've seen over and over and over and over again through society, going back to 1024 AD in China, fail. We do not want to be part of it. We should not be forced to be part of it. We should not be debt slaves to it. And we as individuals should have free market, competing currencies, gold, silver, cryptocurrency, whatever, goats, sheep, whatever. Maybe we'll trade some of the sheep around that are falling for this pyramid scheme that's been going on for almost 1,000 years without any resistance.
Well, Keynesianism, you got to remember, it's just printing money out of thin air, and then of course borrowing mass amounts of money, and then just continuing to print more and more and more, and indebting yourself more and more and more because you believe that the value of the currency would just eliminate the debt over time. Well, the problem is at one point the populace that actually you don't think about is going to say, like, this is garbage. I can't even buy anything with it. I'm just going to use it as heating. Well, it's been shown many times throughout history that's happened. You just got to understand that this is enough. Like people would say, and then it's going to fail. Like it's just a tiny little band-aid on the system. And then, of course, you had a great professor at the University of Manitoba, I'm not going to mention his name, coming out and saying when I was listening to him, oh, you know what happened after the Great Depression? We had a war. That was his finishing statement. That should really worry you when it's bozos and idiots that are sitting up on a pedestal, with this Keynesian PhD economic understanding that they took for years. They believe in that war is going to eliminate the problems with Keynesianism in itself. It's utter insanity.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about it is these guys are a few steps up worse than Keynes, because even John Maynard Keynes believed in IOU notes on gold. He never said anything, from what I remember reading John Maynard Keynes, about paper money that's just printed out of thin air with absolutely no backing. The thing is with centrally planned gold standards, it's also really bad, of course, because, and that's one of the huge problems with Keynes, was just the central planning, this notion of complete central planning. But I mean, then you have a certain amount of gold, and then you print out 500 IOU notes for each piece of gold, and then when there's a run on the bank, there isn't any gold and people are screwed. That's also terrible. So let's not look towards a gold standard. Let's look towards actual physical gold, or at least look to a company that you can trust. If you really want to do that, I think Lode is a good example, or Anthem Gold and
there's
stuff.
Some interesting, crypto precious metal currencies that are coming out.
Transparency.
Yeah, exactly. They have transparency, which is very, 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 very important if you look at history with the transparency part. When you have any gold-backed currencies, if it's private or whatever it is, you have to have that transparency. If you don't have it, it's a garbage currency, and it will be used as it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finishing it off, I just always mention this at the end of our videos. If they shove you down a bottomless pit of debt, you are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you into perfect servitude to them exactly where they want you. They depend on your dependence, which is why you should look towards food, water, shelter, self-defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, and of course, gold and silver as wealth insurance. In our opinion, this isn't investment advice, and besides, gold and silver isn't an investment, it is more of wealth insurance, protecting your purchasing purchasing power. And then look at things like gold, cryptocurrencies that have fundamental value. You have to do your own due diligence. It comes down to individual responsibility and self-sustainability, which is the most important part. And look, for those of you watching in Argentina, look, there's profound evidence of how incredibly strong of a society it has been for such a long time. And you've put up with a lot of crap coming from the West as well, looking at the United States, Operation Condor, the way that that your country was treated by the United States. But don't blame it entirely on the United States. Blame it on the system that was being utilized. And that system, no matter who's running it, will result in the same consequences. So you as individuals have to break free from that central planning and decentralize everything. Rule yourself. Thanks for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.